Hello, John Talley and Garrett Sifford, located in the bunker at the Partzilla studio, coming to you live on this Friday afternoon. Listen, we're going to hang out with you for a little while and answer a few questions, so please send them in, see if you can stump us, make us work this last little bit of Friday. We're going to wait here a few minutes, let a few questions roll in, and it looks like we've got one already coming in from Freddie Bell. Mr. Bell has a 2006 Honda Rancher 350. Exhaust smells badly like gas. Float seems correct, and air fuel also. What is going on? Well, the 2006 Rancher, that is going to be a carbureted model, and chances are, I mean, you must be getting fuel directly into the cylinder itself, and my bet would be a leaking float bowl, because sometimes you can actually have the overflow of the float bowl be stuck, so guess what? It's just going to pump it directly into the cylinder. So my guess is you need to go ahead and pop off that carburetor bowl and take a look inside of that little jet. Make sure it's not stopped up, or the tip of that little jet, which is basically just a little triangle with rubber on the end of it. Make sure that that piece isn't broken off or cracked, because that's where the gas is evidently seeping by and then going into the cylinder. So definitely need to go ahead and pull that carburetor bowl and take a pick.
We got another question from David Jaworski. Says, hey guys, I have a 1999 Yamaha Waverunner 1200 XLT two-stroke, and it revs up to 4,000 RPM and just holds the RPMs there, and then once it warms up after a minute or so, it only goes up to 3,000. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass this one off to John, because I'm not really that big of a two-stroke expert, so we'll pass that one off to you, John.
Well, I do have a little bit of experience with the 1200 XLTs. A lot of fun getting the carburetors out from under that exhaust manifold, isn't it? So, been there a few times. If memory serves, there is a rev limiting aspect to that ECU, and I think that's what you're running into, because it'll actually hold it at 4K and under. But it's been so long, I can't remember what scenario causes that to come about. If you would do a search on that and let me do a little bit of research, and I'll get back in touch with you. And just for kicks, have you checked the output shaft itself right in front of the impeller? I've been fooled before. I had a unit that ran very similar to like what you're describing, and it actually had pulled in part of a ski rope, and it would hold it back with certain RPMs. And I did all kind of stuff, replacing spark plugs, cleaning the carbs. I couldn't get it to rev out. And it was that damn ski rope that I missed that was tucked up in there. So take a look up inside the grate and make sure there's something not physically holding it back, because I've had it happen to me.
Makes sense with it warming up too and slowing down the RPMs, because more heat, more grip, so it bogged the system down.
It's not beyond the realm of possibilities. So take a peek up in there, and let us know if that's it. I'll be curious to hear if I nailed that one.
Let's see. So from Michael K. Cap asks, is Partzilla UK based or American based? Well, Michael, we're based here out of the United States. We have two distribution centers, one in Albany, Georgia, and one in Nevada. And that's where everything goes out from. It's from the United States.
Yep. Nick is asking us, who do you guys ship to Canada now? No. No is the answer right now, and I don't know when that's going to open back up. Now, there are certain manufacturers that were only allowed to sell to the continental United States. I can't remember which one's which, but as far as shipping, well, even though Canada's right next to us, shipping to another country, I don't think that's been released yet. But we can get in touch with you with our service guys, and let you know when that has been relieved and we can actually start shipping worldwide again.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll probably make a Facebook post for it too.
I'm sure it'll be a big deal when we can actually start shipping outside of the States again. So we will keep you in mind and keep you notified. All right, G, what do you think's next?
Let's see. Got a from a user Snipes. It says, my Honda Rancher starter has a slow crank. I wouldn't diagnose it as a dead battery. The neutral light dim, or hold on, let's see. The neutral light isn't dim on or off at all. I've ran it multiple times this previous week with it slowly cranking and then firing right up. I let it sit just a few days because I couldn't get it out of the garage these past couple days. Now the starter is still slow, but it won't fire. I have no clue what the problem is. Any help? And you said you've checked the the first thing I would check is the battery. Obviously, the check because a battery can still, like, without it under a load, can hold 12 volts, but the second you put a load to it, it could drop down below. And if it dips anything below, I'd say I wouldn't go any less than 8. Your battery's bad at that point. Usually want it to not dip below 10 volts, though, to be honest. That would be the first thing I would check, is to see if your battery's bad. And then if your battery checks out fine, at that point you may be looking at a starter. Something, it could be dirty and grimy, or maybe I've even seen rocks hit the side of the can on a starter and keep them from spinning over too. So that would be my next step. Anything you can add to that?
No, that'd be the same thing I'd recommend. Definitely go for the simple stuff first. Take a look at the battery. If you've got a friend that has access to a battery tester, that's actually going to give you the health of the battery. I mean, using just your volt-ohm meter to give you an idea, that's the first step. I mean, if it's north of 12.5 volts, it could be a good battery, but it also could mean it's a bad one, because that doesn't tell you of the muscle that the battery has behind that 12 volts. I mean, if it's worn out and the health is not good, well, then it may start it a couple of times, but then when you're out in the woods and you really need it to, it's not going to get you back home, and that's the last thing you want to have to deal with.
But a good simple test would be to get a buddy to hook your test meter to the battery, hold it on the leads for you, and then hit the start button. If you see the voltage drop down really low, you know your battery's bad.
Yep, it's done all it can do. All right, next we've got one from Solomon Garcia. Can a bad starter cause ground wire on battery to overheat? Just the ground, the lead is fine. Well, actually it can, but if you're telling me that is that the battery overheating, or if it's the ground wire? Because what I've seen before on ground wires, you've got a bunch of different strands inside of that cable, and if it has any type of corrosion damage that you might not be able to see, then instead of having, let's use a round number, 10 strands, if it's operating on 5 or 6, because the other 4 or 5 have been corroded away and not making the conduction, then yeah, it's going to change the resistance value of that and then make it heat up. But if you're telling me, can it make your battery overheat as well? Sure, because that's going to put more strain on your battery as it's trying to go to ground. So that's definitely something you need to look at. You're telling me the lead is fine? Well, then it's going to be the starter, because a bad stator, because it could be overcharging it. So take a peek with it running to make sure it's in spec for your particular unit. And once you determine that, well, go back and check that lead again, because just because you can look at it and say, oh, it's fine and it's reading the 0.1 ohms, that may not be the case. There may be more going in under that sheathing than meets the eye.
Got a question from Mark G. It says, hey, can anyone help? My 2008 GSXR 1000 starts fine, but when I give it the beans, it's lacking in power. What might be causing that? Spark plugs, fuel injectors, fuel pump, what? Well, actually, the first thing I would check would be the spark plugs. I know they're not too terribly hard to get to, but that's usually the first thing you want to check is for fuel and then spark. You can look at your spark plugs, and just looking at the condition of the plug can tell you whether or not they're fouled out, because if you do have a slight fouling on 1 or 2 plugs, it's not going to let the engine rev out at all, period. After you've checked your plugs, depending on how long it's been since you replaced the plugs, it may be due to go ahead and change them anyways at this point. It is a 2008. There's a good chance the plugs have never been replaced on it before. That would be the first thing I would check, is the plugs, and then after that, it could be a faulty fuel pump. If the fuel pump's not pressurizing the fuel rail properly, it's not getting enough fuel for the spark, so it won't rev out either as well. As far as injectors, I don't know. I know injectors will keep one from starting completely, but I'm not aware of them like keeping it from revving out. Yeah, period. When they go, they're gone for the most part.
Because they're just sending pulses, and they're just opening and closing. It's not an analog factor there. It's either all or nothing, and it's just a calculation of time of how long they're open that determines how much fuel they spray. And how much fuel they spray, that's determined by the pressure of the fuel pump. So if the pump's not pumping out like it should, the stream's not going to be as vast and strong to enter the combustion chamber. Now, when you're doing the pressure test on the pump itself, you want to do a static one, and that'll give you just what its best case can be, and it should be in the 50 range if I remember correctly for a GSXR. But also do it with it running. And if you can get a load on the machine, like at a dyno or something like that, you need to keep an eye on the gauge, because I've seen fuel pumps lie to me before. I mean, it's kind of like a battery. It'll show
Yeah.
you that it'll show you that 12.5 volts, but when you put a load on it and when it has to deliver the pressure, drop down to like 25, and that's not going to get it done. And
Yes.
I'll lay you odds that's probably what's going on.
Especially if the bike's not running. A lot of times they'll check the pressure just at the pump with the engine off and say, oh, I got 50 PSI, we're good. But as soon as them injectors open up, it's like water pressure. I mean, if you don't have the right pressure, you can't get the right volume.
Well, it'll give the pressure, but not the flow.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
no.
And another thing to add, if it is the fuel pump, whatever you do, don't buy an aftermarket one.
No.
Don't buy one of the $20 to $5 ones off eBay, because chances are you may buy 6 or 7 before you get one that works, and it'll probably only work for a couple weeks. So it's usually best to buy OEM. I know it's a little bit more money on fuel pumps, but it's the cheaper way to go in the long run.
All right, see how good my memory is here. Ollie Euler Joe 76 says, I have a Honda 250 Recon with the brakes on the front. How do I check the brakes to see if they're still good? Are those regular calipers? And
on the 250 Recon?
yeah.
I think they're
Or is that drum up there?
I think they're drums up front. If I remember correctly, it's drums on because it's kind of the entry level four-wheeler. I don't think they have disc brakes on the rear. I mean on the front of those. I think they're drum brakes. I could be wrong.
I'm pretty sure it's the drum though.
Yeah.
And in that case, if you pull the adjustment, there's a little cap on the inside or on the outside of the drum. You can pull that, and if you rotate it to the right position, you might be able to get a good shot or a visual of the thickness of the pads. But if you really want to be sure, go ahead and pull the outer drum and then take a look at the pads. They should be around. They start off at around a 1/8 of an inch thick. If they're anything less than a 1/16, go ahead and replace them. Plus, you're already there, and they're really not that expensive. So I'd say if you're going to open it up, go ahead and replace them. I mean, you wouldn't want to go in there and then not do anything about it.
And if you do replace them, make sure you hit you some sandpaper on the inside of the brake drum too. Go ahead and knock that glazing off, because if they're old, it's probably good and glazed.
One other thing, if it's an older machine, go ahead and invest in new seals for the outside, because chances are water's probably got in there and waterlogged them and probably turned it into a mess in there. That's going to take a while to clean up, but you'll be impressed by how well it will stop once you get everything cleaned out with a new set of pads and clean out the drum itself.
And that too, like with those pistons, like when you go to put the new pads on, you got to push them in and out to like recenter them. Then sometimes I could bust the seal just itself, and then you'll have to make another order and wait a couple more days for more parts to get there. Let's see. I have Arturo Sorta says, hi, I bought an Eagle Motors 250cc ATV and I want to upgrade it, but I can't find aftermarket parts for it. Looking for exhaust, an air filter, and a new chain. The Eagle, is that, I'm not really sure, you may have to answer the question for me, but is it like one of the Chinese style models, four-wheelers? Because I'm not familiar with Eagle four-wheelers.
So I'm not familiar with that one either.
Maybe something like Apollo or a Teo. I mean, they make a bunch of different models like that, but just let me know exactly what you're talking about there. Let's see.
All right, Beverly Hills is asking a question on a Yamaha FZ8. The right radiator fan blew a fuse. I just bought this bike with 15K on it, and it doesn't overheat, but I noticed the fan wasn't running. What would cause this fuse to blow? Well, this is going to be a couple of things. Well, one, are we sure that we've got the right amperage fuse in there? I mean, you don't want to go chasing a problem that doesn't exist because somebody put a 5 amp in there when there should be a 10 or a 15. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would guess it's going to be in that 10 range. Make sure it's got the right size, amperage fuse in it first. After that, well, chances are it is probably going to be the motor, but go ahead and check the resistance of that actual wire that's going from, I think it's going to be coming from a relay over to the motor itself for the fan. After that, it's probably going to be the fan itself. Now, if you've got a nice enough volt-ohm meter, if it can go past that 10 to 15 amps, you can actually put it in series, change it over to amperage, and then just do a quick measurement. Just a static test, not even running the bike. Just send voltage through it to see how much of a draw that the motor is actually putting on that particular wire. But it's going to be one or the other, or one of the three. Either the fuse is the wrong size, you could have a problem with the wiring there, or the motor needs to be replaced. So good luck with that, and let us know what you find out.
All right, got a David. I think this is the same guy with the 1200. Yeah, he's asking if there's an easy way to get those carburetors off.
No. I
Saw
really
the hole in half.
Yeah, if Yamaha would have given us just that much more, it wouldn't be such a dang problem. There's no real easy way to do it. You have to get that expansion or that exhaust expansion chamber out of there, and it's hard to do. There's no getting around it. You have to get those bolts that are down around that you can't see, and then disconnect it from the back, and then wrangle it out of there. And just getting it positioned out of there, there's no real easy way. Now, it's been a few years since I've done it before, but I'd like to say, well, you just do this exact procedure, but it's been a little too long. But I can tell you, you have to get that out of the way before you can get down to those carburetors. There's no other way around it. But if you go through all the pain to do that, go ahead and replace most every replaceable rubber piece that you can get to, as far as your oiler lines, as far as the diaphragms, the O-rings, the seals, everything. I would go all the way through it, because your rebuild kits are not that expensive. And it's the amount of your time and labor and the pain that you're going to go through to get down there. Go ahead and take care of it all. That way it'll be good to go for several seasons to come.
And grab you a box of Band-Aids for all the busted knuckles you received.
Good grief, yes.
All right, we have a question from Cody Volson. It says, I was riding my 2008 Honda Rancher 420 4x4 in fifth gear, and the rear tire's locked up, and now it goes in reverse when in neutral, and it also does in reverse, but won't move at all while in gear.
Wow.
Wow.
Looks like his shifter
fork.
The shifter mechanism
the
up
mechanism
front.
up front's messed up.
Yes.
That's where I would point to.
Something has broken up there, because even if it's an E-shift, the electric shift is just basically taking the shift shaft and just popping it every so often. And there's a detent that allows it to do this. It's almost like a sequential shifter that causes it to go through the gears. That shifting function, or that arm, is broken.
Yeah,
it had to let go. Something systemic has gone wrong there. But that's going to be on the front side of the engine.
Let's see. Got a Javier says, your videos are super useful. I got a 2004 CBR F4i brake bolts torque specs. Actually, I want to say I did a video, not on an F4i, but I think it was a 954 actually, now that I think about it. We could look up the brake. I'm sure one of our guys can get you the torque specs for the brake bolts. The caliper bolts or the front wheel axle bolt? Which one are you looking for?
Well, how about we get him both?
Or both, yeah, that works too. That works.
All right, Javier is asking us also, any suggestions on wiring a change guard for accessories which requires ignition input along with battery and ground? Okay, you're talking about adding in like a secondary circuit. Well, you would want to do that not using the existing vehicle harness. It was designed to deal with what's on the machine, and that's all. So if you're going to add in another ignition point, you would use the existing ignition, or you turn it on, the key switch on, to actually power a relay. Now, and then you would draw the power that you're going to use from for your accessory through that relay. That way it separates it from that actual wire that you're just getting a quote trigger from for the ignition on. That would you would have to do that. Otherwise, then you're going to stress, overly stress the existing wire, and you don't want to do that.
Looks like we got Cody back. He says, awesome guys, thanks for that. Would you require splitting the cases on the 2008 Rancher?
No.
If I'm not mistaken, you shouldn't have to. Now you may have to pull the engine from the frame and turn it sideways, because it's only going to be on the back side, like where the recoil starter kit would be at. And you pull that back cover off, and that should give you access to all the internals that's causing that issue for you. But as far as splitting the case, if it's just on the surface like we think it is, you wouldn't have to split the cases on it.
I agree. I mean, you shouldn't have to go past that to get to what we're talking about, as being the problems. Oh, Daniel Harrison is asking us, why do ATV filters have oil on them? What's the purpose for them? Okay, I guess he's talking about air filters, potentially.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna think.
Well, you don't oil a regular paper type filter, and that's the last thing you want to do. Those are designed to be replaced. Your foam type or your K&N type filters, which kind of look like a paper one, they're designed to be cleaned and then re-oiled again. And the reason you want to re-oil it, or you want to oil them period, is that oil helps capture all that dust that you're probably riding in. I mean, the filters as they are, they'll stop the bigger stuff, but that's not what we're really after. We're after that, but we're after the dust as well, and the oil just kind of grabs it and holds it on to it, so it doesn't get pulled into the engine. That would be the reason you oil certain types of filters, but just make sure you don't oil a paper type, because it's going to turn it into paper mache, and it's not going to run very well. It may run a little bit rich.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, that oil's super sticky. It's kind of like a garage hack where if you're trying to fish a blind bolt out, a lot of times you can just coat whatever your socket is with oil, and it'll actually grab the bolt and you can pull it right on out and line certain bearings up, and that oil's good stuff.
Looks like Partzilla already answered the question for Javier about the brake caliper bolts. So thanks, guys.
Yep. Says, I'm kind of new working on bikes and things. I have specs of the oils I need. Do I need to use ATV oil? Oh, sorry, another question popped through. Do I need to use ATV oil, or would car oil work? What about synthetic or conventional? Depends on what system. If you're running like anything with what's considered a wet clutch system, which means the clutch discs are submerged in the crankcase, you actually need to use a motorcycle ATV oil. You can't use an automotive oil, because there's a certain additive that actually loosens friction, and what will cause to happen is you'll burn your clutch plates up, because they'll just spin on the side of the basket and they'll burn up in no time. And once they get impregnated with that, that lubricant, they're trashed. Like, there's no like taking them out, letting them dry out, and try to reuse them.
Cleaning them with brake cleaner.
There's no clean them up. It's not gonna fix it. You'll ruin a clutch pack in a heartbeat using automotive oil in a motorcycle or ATV. So yeah, definitely. And as far as like conventional, what I call dyno oil or synthetic, they're both about the same, in my opinion. And you get longer life out of a synthetic oil because it's a lot cleaner. It really just depends on what's in your budget. And the main thing is to get the weight right. Whatever the manufacturer specifies you use, that's what you need to stick with. But as far as like conventional or synthetic, they're both just as good. The synthetic has its pros, but either one will work as long as you got the correct weight.
All right, Oiler he's all about some oils. If I get DOT brake fluid, is that good enough, or should I buy what's at the local dealer? Well, my question would be, what machine is it going in? Because a DOT3 fluid, that is good for the majority of machines out there. But if you're in a higher performance application where you're really on the binders hard, that's going to cause that oil to have to put up with a lot of heat. And a DOT, I can't remember what its boil point is, but it's not that high. And chances are you would boil it out, and that you might as well disconnect your brake cable at that point, because you're not going to have any brakes.
Turns that oil to gas, and then you've got no pressure built up, and your brake pedal goes to the floor. Nobody wants that in a turn.
So I would say in a utility environment, DOT3 is going to be just fine. But if you're in a race environment, go to 4. But I would not go to a 5, because 5 is the silicone-based stuff, and I think just the military uses that. And plus, it really attracts water.
Yeah,
what they call it, hydrophobic.
Or hydroscopic.
Hydroscopic, is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
And it'll actually pull water in, or moisture into the system, and no, that won't end well. I've seen what that can do with a machine that's been sitting up a little too long, and it wasn't pretty.
Yeah. I got another question from Deshaun8. It says, do you guys sell YFZ 450 plastics? Of course we do. You just have to, if you navigate on the website with your year, you can find it. You'll need to know what the color code is for the plastic. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Yamaha just spells it out for you, whether it's blue, yellow, or whatever the color is. But you'll need to do some research as far as what the color code is for your plastic. And you can just look us up on on Partzilla.com, and yes, we can sell you plastics. Now there will be an oversized shipping fee, because those plastics are big, depending on how big the piece is. If it's like a front cowling or something that can go in a small box, then yes, it'd be the normal shipping. But if you're needing like the rear fenders or the front fenders, that's going to be an oversized item. So just be prepared for that.
All right, this was written for me. Angelian is asking, what are the consequences of a too lean carb mixture? Well, that.
Yeah.
And what that is the top of a piston that decided it would eat part of a valve that got burned off. Because what happens with too lean of a condition is you get too much heat in there and not enough lubrication. Believe it or not, fuel actually does lubricate and cool down the walls to a certain extent. And with the too lean condition, it gets too hot in there and it will actually burn your exhaust valves. Unfortunately, I know all about this because of a failed fuel injector or a partially failed fuel injector. So still igniting the chamber, but not enough.
Yeah.
And ended up costing me a rather pricey engine build. So they say you've got to be lean to be mean as far as making power, but you run the risk when you push it that far of having something like this happen if the fuel system is not operating perfectly. And with a carbureted system, you're even more at risk because it can't adjust for changes in elevations or humidity or temperature or anything else. So if you're going to play with leaning out a carb, be prepared to rebuild an engine potentially if you run it to the ragged edge. So fair warning.
And those little carburetor small engines, they're so ticky that just putting a aftermarket, high performance exhaust could possibly lean one out to engine failure too. So I mean, they're tuned to the fare-thee well from the factory. So that's anytime you put an exhaust or even an air filter on some cases on a model, they recommend you to like rejet the carburetor or retune the ECU like with a power commander or something like that. And it doesn't take long either to burn one up.
No, it does not.
Let's see. Says, does my 2000, this is from Jeremy Alford, does my 2000 Rancher two-wheel drive have a fuel filter? It should, not necessarily a fuel filter per se, it should be like a little screen filter on the petcock. So you'd have to pull the petcock out from the tank, and that's usually where the filter is. But there's no reason you couldn't put an inline fuel filter coming out of, out of the petcock in line with the carburetor. Actually, that's usually what I do with mine anyways, because the little petcock in the tank, it will stop some debris, but it doesn't stop a lot, and it could still gum up your carburetor if you're not careful. Let's see.
All right, well, we got one from Martin Raptor. Any tips on stopping a vibrating aluminum skid plate on a Raptor 700? Now, I'm guessing this is maybe an aftermarket plate.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, yeah.
My first suggestion would be probably to use a copper washer, something that could actually grind into a little bit, and Loctite to try to hold it all together. Try those two things. If that still doesn't work, maybe go from a copper type washer to a rubber one. So you're just going to be a little bit creative, but trying to get metal and metal and to clamp together on a flat surface like that, it's going to be kind of tough. So give it a little bit of give, or a place to give, to where it'll hold on a little bit tighter.
Kind of dampen the vibration up too. So.
Yep. Well, all right, guys. Well, Garrett, there went 30 minutes.
That went by quickly.
This one zipped by. Listen, a bunch of great questions, guys, and we just want to say thanks for dropping in and spending a little bit of time with us. And any questions that we didn't get to, or anything that you want answered, even after we get through streaming, go ahead and leave it in the comments section below, and we'll put it on the list and get it answered next time around. Once again, we just want to say thanks for swinging by. Thanks for shopping with us here at Partzilla, and y'all have a great weekend, and we will see you, God willing, next Friday at 3 o'clock. Y'all have a good one.
Have to keep the rubber side up.